Good evening. This is Norwich Confidential. I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And we have no guest tonight, but because we had planned on talking about the video that we had on last week. We had spliced 3 interviews together so that what we were actually showing you was what we hope was a simplified explanation of what the TPP or Trans-Pacific Partnership, what the TIP or the Transatlantic Partnership, and what the TISA or the Service Agreement, what these trade agreements really are, what the impact is, and what's happening with them.
Well, so I'll be the interviewer, and Bonnie will give us the answers.
You know most of the answers.
And unfortunately, we tried to retrieve some of those videos, and we couldn't get it because we lost it. And I was telling Bonnie, but the only way that we can get a copy of that is to send a Freedom of Information Act to the NSA, and they have our entire file. So
they'll have our entire file, you're right.
So I think we've been talking about TTP for some time, and again, we try to explain to you what that means, and the words can sometimes be misleading. Basically, TPP stands for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it is supposed to be made up of 11 or 12 nations together that supposedly will try to market their products within these countries. Unfortunately, these 12 nations basically controls or cornered about 40% of all the economic...
the world market, the world economy.
Market. So this becomes therefore a monopoly. Well, not really monopoly in the sense that it's only 40% or so.
Well, but that's only the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Right.
Because this has been secret. Actually, it has now been released so that we can look at it. Actually, the first country to release it was New Zealand. It was not the United States.
Well, that's because like they said, there's no honor among thieves. So every country wants to get ahead of the other countries. And of course, we as the United States, we have the biggest power in this group. And most of the big companies come from our country. So we try to really ram it down to them and say, hey, listen, if you want us to buy your sugar or your coconuts or your bananas, then you probably should sign this agreement.
Wasn't there a banana revolution at one time?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
okay.
As a consequence, we now have an agreement from these 12 countries on what products they will protect. And most of these, like I said, is the huge American company.
Right, because very little of this really has to do with trade and what products will not have tariffs and what we will actually trade without tariffs. Very little of this Trans-Pacific Partnership is geared toward that.
Well, the thing though is this, that if I were a big company, like if I were a huge pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Oh, like Pfizer?
Like Pfizer. So where do you think I will put my my factory? Well, in one of these 12 nations. Well, which 12 nations would probably be the easiest way to do it at the cheapest? Well, Vietnam is one of them. So can you imagine that Vietnam signed as a country toward this partnership?
Yep.
And what does Vietnam have to contribute to this other than, well, they
and there are a number of Malaysian countries that we know were, up until this contract was signed, were doing a trade in in trafficking of human beings.
And that's outside of the point. But in any case, so the word trade, really, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the word trade is really not a trade, because if you really look hard into this thing, it's really a monopoly. And as you can probably see, if this is a Pacific area, a partnership, then you would imagine, why did they not include China? Well, that's probably because they're they're surrounding China,
Right.
squeezing them out of all this partnership,
That's
which
what they-
we will be talking about,
Right.
the TTIP.
Right, the TIP, because
TIP.
that's the, however, again, I think most Europeans are aware that the transatlantic partnership is being negotiated now. And you've already had, in spite of the fact that there is nothing has been leaked from the transatlantic partnership the way it was in the Trans-Pacific partnership. We did have one whistleblower who was able to leak, I think there were only 4 chapters that he actually leaked to WikiLeaks, but
So-
that's the only reason we knew about it ahead of time.
So let me start from the beginning, Bonnie, by asking you the question. And number one would be, how did you know about such an agreement is being discussed? That there is such an agreement among the trade partnership in the Pacific nations.
Well, that's actually how we found out, was because of WikiLeaks.
Right.
And we had 4 chapters of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that were leaked. He did publish those. And I think that as bad as we saw those 4 chapters of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, when we actually now have been able to see the full details of the partnership, it really is even worse than what
Well-
they originally thought this
Right.
would be.
So like you said, we didn't even know who the players were, but of course we suspected that they were major corporations. And yes, indeed, it turned out to be true that supposedly were making some kind of agreement among themselves, and they meet secretly somewhere in the Philippines, which we happen to know,
Right.
the Boracay. And then, of course, they also had a meeting, I think last December here in Hawaii. And all these meetings, of course, were shut down to the public, so nobody can really know what's exactly. Now, the funny thing about this whole situation is that early on, when this agreement was in its infancy, that they get the full support of our government, of course, of our president, of our Secretary of the State, and I think Hillary Clinton at one time said that this is going to be some kind of agreement that's going to be used as the gold standard.
The gold standard for trade agreements.
For future trade agreement
Right.
among nations. So they limit themselves initially in this Pacific countries. But of course, they found out that after this whole thing has been leaked, and so a lot of these informations are coming out, and now it was brought to Congress to be voted on, and which we have a lot of things to say about that also, on how they can circumvent the discussion and the debate.
But that unfortunately, Ben, has already been decided, because
yes.
we already, I think we talked on here about fast track and why we were opposed to fast track when it was coming up.
Yeah.
However, the president really pushed for it. The Republicans really pushed for it, and they got it through.
So let's get to the details first, Bunny.
All right.
So what are these agreements? First, number one, who are give me an example of players. For instance, an
The
American
players are all
American pharmacological company.
pharmaceutical companies.
What is their agreement? I mean, for the rest of the countries to sign.
For pharmaceuticals, it's pretty easy. They've gotten a lot out of this. First of all, they can set up their factories anywhere. Their patents...
Anywhere within this 12 nations?
Within the 12 nations.
Right.
Their patents are protected, not just the way they are here, but they've also extended the patents through this agreement.
Right.
If they have it in a pill form and they decide they now can put it also in a liquid form, their patent will be extended for those 8 years or whatever. Then they decide it could be used as an inhaler. The patent will again be extended for the additional 7 years. I mean, this keeps going on and on and on.
They also wanted to make the patent exclusive to extend up to 16 years or something like that.
In the beginning,
in
right.
the beginning. So basically what they're saying is that, well, we have a product here that we can manufacture very cheaply among these nations, and now we're going to sell it to you at this price.
Right.
And you cannot
have a generic,
bargain,
right. You cannot bargain it down. You
Right.
cannot have a contract to get it lower.
Right.
I mean, think about this.
Right.
They also have the most dangerous part of this. We've seen how Congress has been bought, basically.
Yes.
We've seen how
Right.
big money gets in and influences our legislative branch of government. The problem is that with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we are now losing a big part of the third branch of our government, which is our
Yes.
courts.
Well, before you get into that one, because you're so much ahead of us.
Well, I was
So
talking about the drugs.
So the pharmaceutical companies are able to put this on the table and say, okay, this is what we want. And of course, the other countries will have to vote on that. This was done in secret. So New Zealand says, oh, I'm not going to vote for that. You just have to accept what we want also. What do we get out of this? And New Zealand says, well, we are going to export our livestock. So there will be lamb chops all over the world. So we want to be the exclusive source of these lamb chops, because we get a lot of herds of, what do you call it, herd of sheep. And so they said, okay, I'll vote your drugs, you vote my lamb chops. And that's how it got to be voted among the two of them.
That may be part of how those deals were constructed. I don't really know that.
Right.
But I do know that all of these corporations were allowed in. They were the ones that were actually writing these agreements. And yet, our representatives in Congress were not allowed to see it.
Well, we do have our government representative that's set on this.
Yeah, through our State Department with
Right.
Hillary Clinton deciding who was going to go there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And basically, I think this was the State Department at Hillary Clinton's time. They actually were the one who wrote the formula for the trade agreement of what is best for us.
But I think that what I want to get back to is, let's take the drugs, for example. Because it does, part of this trade agreement is the investor dispute settlement agreement part of this, which basically says that all these countries have to have any dispute settled by their own tribunal, that each one of these countries' own legal system cannot be involved. Now, their tribunal is made up of between 3 and 5 of their own lawyers. These are corporate lawyers who then will decide on the merits of their case. The merit will always go if there is anything that interferes with the profits of those corporations. The country or whoever is the other disputed party will lose. The corporation will always win on the side of profit. That's what these trade agreements are meant to do, is to protect the profits of the corporations. So, if you have a prescription that you cannot have a generic for, however, the country, like let's take the United States, where they already have agreements with a number of the pharmaceutical companies, so that the VA, for example, can actually negotiate the prices. So the VA is able to get medications at they are substantially lower. Is
Yes.
that true?
A lot substantially lower.
A lot okay, a lot substantially lower. Now, let's say the Trans-Pacific Partnership goes through and Pfizer, that is relocating its corporate office out of the United States over to where? Scotland or somewhere? They're picking up and leaving those good corporate citizens of this country. So their headquarters will be located in another country. So now that they are involved, however, manufacturing their pharmaceuticals in Taiwan or Vietnam or Cambodia or one of those other countries, and we're importing their drugs, and they're saying, well, no, we are not going to negotiate with the VA. These are the only drugs, and this is the price. And there is not a thing this country can do about it. All of a sudden, the ability for the VA is now that ability to negotiate for the price of drugs is now taken away. It doesn't matter what our laws say, doesn't matter what our regulations say, it's what the corporation says. And we cannot go to our courts to try to enforce our own laws because they don't apply. When you have an arbitrary court that can override the laws and regulations in this country, something is very, very wrong.
Well, so the big corporations look at this as like a perfect blueprint. And they can actually...
The gold standard for trade.
It will be the gold standard and so on. So there is something here that is everything will benefit the big companies. One is it's not just financing, because they definitely get a hold on that, but they also can make sure that their products will continue to give them the highest profit possible, and that everyone else is captive to their company. And then they built in some kind of a fail-safe in such a way that if somebody tries to oppose their will, that they can sue the government of that country, not the person who is opposing it, but it's the government, and that they can be awarded a huge sum of money for lost profit. $1 million,
millions and millions and millions of dollars. The one that struck me the most, because this has already been going on among other trade agreements that have already been enacted, but when you consider that the country of Egypt was sued by, I can't remember which manufacturing corporation, because they raised the minimum wage for their workers. Egypt was sued because that impinged on the profits of the corporation, and the corporation won.
Well, that's just an example. We'll go into that in a second, Bonnie. So basically, a blueprint all of a sudden was created that really will benefit the big corporations with the backing of the strongest government, which is us. And so looking at it, the big company says, this is a great idea, but we only are able to corner 40% of the world economy. How about getting it to Europe so we can control the other 60%? So now they have...
Well, that encompasses another 45%.
Yeah.
But this isn't new. I mean, this also has been being negotiated for the last 8 years.
Right.
That's the TIP, the Transatlantic Trade Partnership.
Which this time will include, of course, the U.S., then Canada, and
all the European Union.
And as you can imagine, they did not include Russia or China again.
Right.
So this basically is like a world domination and world order. So they're trying, the same big company can be so powerful that they can be more powerful than the most powerful nation on earth. And if they get you by their economic hold, then they certainly can have their way.
Right.
So this is really kind of scary, and for the simple reason, of course, that everyone is going to become a pawn in what these big companies will do in the future.
I think that, again, just by looking at something that is simple, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership is it's easier to understand than both the TIP and the TISA. Because we've had it out there a little bit longer, we know a little bit more about it. But that it's still easier to understand. I think that when you begin to understand it and you begin to realize that we will no longer have sovereignty, that you have a separate court that is outside the jurisdiction of our courts, that will decide things that can affect every aspect of your life, that is very, very dangerous to our democracy.
Well, that's very true. I know the last thing I read about was in the UK, that they were having a debate on this bill that they were going to pass that states that this bill will supersede whatever bill was written before this bill, and that if the profit of a company or the best interest of the nation is jeopardized, then this bill will supersede previous bills. So basically what they're saying is that if there was a bill before that says environmental control or something that will say improve efficiency or climate change, and that this will reduce the profit of that big company, that this bill will protect the big profit company.
Not protect the environment, not protect our water supply, will not protect our air quality.
So if you really look into that, and you will say, wow, this may work, Bunny. This may work, because then there won't be any war anymore. All these big companies need to do is squeeze you out and starve you to death, like what they're trying to do now. And I think they're probably purposely going to do that in the future, for the simple reason that they never even invited Russia or China to be part of these deals. So you have the Pacific Partnership, and now you have the
Atlantic Partnership. But the China and Russia and Brazil that's all part of the BRIC. That's they have their own partnership.
They also have their own. So this is really.
If you want to give us a call and get involved in this discussion. If you have a question about what the Trans-Pacific Partnership is, give us a call and we'll try to answer those questions.
There's so many things to learn. Unfortunately, we just really cannot explain everything. And the other thing, of course, that it can be very complicated. So please read and make sure that you get it from a reliable source.
And that's very difficult.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult because there's no information out there.
Right. You're not seeing this on CBS or NBC.
And our Congress is actually being strong-armed into voting this. And they are only allowed to vote yes or no. They cannot even debate this because this agreement has already been agreed upon. So,
well, it's also the reason that Congress has to just vote yes or no on this.
And this is what is called as fast-tracked.
Is because they already voted for fast-track, where they knew that they would just be voting yes or no on this deal. And that's how brilliant Congress is.
So we do have our representative, but I don't think we're being represented.
We're not.
I'm not even sure if our representative know what they're voting on. And unfortunately, this is just like anything else. You know, you wear your jacket with all the logos of the big companies,
of the corporations who sponsor you.
Right.
Let's see. I can have a Pfizer patch, and I can have one from Monsanto, and
then you
I can have one from Shell Oil. Some of those jackets that the congressman could wear, or the senators could wear, would just be so full of these patches, folks. That
they don't have to debate on it, they just pass it through. So there is something going on that eventually it will unfold, and unfortunately it's not going to be it will not unfold in real time, because now they're asking to hold any information to be leaked out for another 4 years. Is that right, Bonnie? What were
no,
you
no,
trying to say?
that was before
I see.
WikiLeaks. They had originally thought that they would be able to quickly fast track quietly
And keep all these agreements in secret
for 4 years after it was passed.
Right.
That's what they were hoping to do, because these agreements are so damaging to our democracy. You know, so we've talked a little bit about TPP and TIP, the Trans-Pacific and the Transatlantic partnerships, which are both basically constructed the same way. You have not seen all of the protests that have already been going on in Japan against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in Germany and France against and Britain against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's the people in these countries that recognize how damaging this is going to be. So we've been kept in the dark, and that's scary. But what's even scarier is the third trade agreement. This third trade agreement, which is TISA, T-I-S-A, is going to affect just services, not goods that are traded, but actual services. The bottom line of TISA states that anything that the government provides that can be privatized must be privatized. So that's pretty easy to discern right away. You don't have public schools, you don't have public health, because those can be privatized. They've already been trying to do it. You've got the charter schools, you've got, you know, our jails have been privatized.
Yes.
Our insurance for health care has been privatized. You've got, but now they're saying that everything that can be privatized must be. The post office, we would no longer have an independent government post office. It would be a corporate post office. But think about this. Think about your local police department. Think about everything that these corporations would then control, and then think about our police department. Think about that being controlled by Blackwater. We've seen a little bit of militarized police in this country. That's the start. But to privatize the police department, think about what that is. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This is real. You know.
Well, this is in discussion stage, of course.
No, this has already been passed. This is what they're talking about.
We still don't really know. Again, we don't know the details of this, but all the services that are being provided by any nation should be privatized. Of course, who are the corporations that offers these services? Of course, a big corporate company again. So if you want to have highway maintenance, then you have to contract
Halliburton. Some of the
Right.
large industrial,
Right.
military industrial contractors
Yeah,
would be first on the list of those companies that would be.
Maintaining prison system, yeah, well, that's already being done. Prison food, yeah, that's already being done.
Right.
And
The Army food.
Army food, oh, that's already being done.
That's already being done.
Yeah.
You slowly, this is already, it's happening, and I think that the most frightening part about this is that we're sleeping through it. You know, I mean, we have watched it happen, and we have so many issues that you have someone like Trump, who is part of the 1%, who can get up there and direct your hatred and your anger and your frustration toward first the Mexicans, because they're all thieves and drug addicts that are coming in, and we should put up this great big wall and keep the Mexicans out. He'll direct all that anger and hate that's in this country right now toward immigration and the immigrants, or toward the Syrians, or toward the gays, or toward the poor. It's those people that are on welfare. Oh, okay. It's those people that are on welfare. He's able to direct that anger and that frustration toward groups that are not responsible for this. It is distracting. This is not where the danger is. The danger is not Syrians. The real danger to America and our democracy is within.
Well, if you want to bring Trump into our discussion...
No, I didn't really want to, but...
I want you to know, Bonnie, that those kind of tactics and techniques do work.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they work all the time. And I've seen them work. I've seen them work in Indonesia. I've seen them work in the Philippines. In Indonesia at one time, the economy was so bad and so poor and so really horrible. But the president at that time, Sukarno, blamed it on the Chinese and says it's because the Chinese are hoarding all the money and so on and so on. And Sukarno, of course, was voted as president for life. Right. Now, this is exactly the same technique that Trump is doing right now without even knowing that this is what he's doing. Right. But he realized in his response that, in his response that when things are bad and he says something that is even badder,
even worse,
that his poll numbers will go up.
Yes.
And so without even thinking or even knowing about it, he struck a nerve that is very responsive to his
a lot of it, Ben, is because people right now can be so easily persuaded that that's where their problem is.
It's a fear-mongering, and it's basically racial tone and economic, of course, and all these other things that everybody in this country do have some stress level that saying, well, gee, I don't know what my future is going to be.
Right. And then it's easier to blame it on Syrians or the immigrants or the people that are on welfare, when the real welfare culprits in this country are the corporations that don't pay a livable wage in this country, so that we end up paying for their health, their employees' health care through Medicaid. We end up subsidizing their food through food stamps because they don't pay their employees enough, full-time employees.
So basically our message for tonight is that think exactly behind what each of them are telling you, because there's a lot of false information out there, and not only that, but they'll lie right through their teeth, and even especially the mainstream media. And so if you look at that, you have to really think very hard as to what is really the agenda that these people have behind what they're saying.
I know.
And what really is truth.
There's a great newspaper article. A friend of ours actually put it on his Facebook page. It was a wonderful article about the man who already has enough information. He already knows enough about the Syrians. He doesn't need to know any more. We should just keep him out of here. He doesn't need any more information. You read the entire article. It is an incredible article. And then, you begin to think, does this guy really mean what he's saying? You can read the whole article, and if you don't know where it was published, you might actually think this was real. But it was published in The Onion. If you have never gotten The Onion, you do have to, at least to have a little humor in...
It's sarcasm.
It is
humor.
sarcasm.
And so we get a lot of informed, opinionated people.
Yeah.
So,
but at least with The Onion, people that are reading it really are informed.
Right.
You know that they do get it.
Right.
That they're listening to something other than Fox News every night.
Well, that's a point to that. But in any case, people sometimes look at this that, well, it really is a joke. But then some people will look at that as, well, that's really fact.
Yeah, so, they want to believe it's fact,
So we do need to, inform everyone. And yes, there are a lot of things that we could not even cover tonight. But we just want everyone to be informed where we're heading, where politics is leading us, and economy is leading us, and where are all the money that's supposed to be we're making all over in Wall Street. How come it's not coming to my pocket?
Right, because Wall Street takes it out of your pocket, sweetheart. It's not trickle down, it's suck it up.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these suction cups that just say, oh, okay, the middle class still has more we can squeeze out of it. Let's just suck that up too. You know,
Wow.
we can do a little bit more there.
So,
I know it's totally frustrating. But we do want to let you know that we are aware that last week's video on the show, when it was aired last week, there was a problem with the equipment. We're not sure if it was the video that was brought in or what happened, but you had two very distracting green lines through the video, and then all of a sudden, 33 minutes into this 1 hour program, it just stopped. But those videos are still available online. If you went to Norwich Confidential on Facebook, you can actually watch the full hour program of those 3 interviews. Ben and I are not on there, but you will see the first interview is by a group in Britain, talking a little bit more specifically about the transatlantic partnership, but because it is basically the same as the Trans-Pacific partnership, it's explained beautifully. The second interview is with Chris Hedges, who is interviewing an attorney and an activist, and they're talking specifically also about not just the TIP, but the TISA as well. He goes into a great deal of giving you a great deal of information about the service agreements that I think is probably the most dangerous and the most frightening of all. And then the third interview is one that Bill Moyers did some time ago, before we had the complete version of the TPP in front of us. We already knew how bad it would be, and in fact, it is even worse. So, I mean,
well,
all of it is really frightening, Ben.
It's worth listening to. And I think, is our time coming down, Bunny? Or?
I think they're still trying to work on the video,
Right.
because we're trying to bring it up so that we'd like to show you at least the first 6 minutes of that film.
If our time is running out, I just want to inform
about
our
40 minutes, so.
listeners
20
also
minutes.
that in January we're going to invite our elected council representative.
Yes.
And
Our senator, our state senator,
our state senator as
Kathy
well.
Olston, will be here in January.
And our Board of Education members, the new members. Now that they are
Yes.
there, let's see if they remembered what they promised us. So it would be the city of Norwich Council also.
Right.
So we will invite them over and kind of get their ideas as to, well, what do you think?
Right. Since a number of them that are now sitting on the Norwich City Council all signed the pledge to have the Norwich anti-corruption resolution passed, I'm anxious to see if they do bring it up and introduce it, and we do get an anti-corruption bill, at least in Norwich, passed. So.
And on a regular basis, we of course will want to bring to you the information and news that's happening in Norwich, because we don't read them anymore in the newspaper.
I know. So if you have a topic that you do want discussed, please, you can drop us a line on the Facebook page or give me a call.
And we'll give you the person who will answer that for you by inviting the person who is in charge in Norwich. And if it is about a police issue, we'll have some of the police department people come up here, or public works and so on.
Right.
Because we don't have the answer. As a matter of fact,
we're good at asking questions. We try to find the answers.
My only source is the NSA program,
the NSA
archived.
Because they do have everything. Okay, I think that unless that film, they watch that film, and I'm really begging you to just spend that 1 hour watching those 3 interviews so that you really do know what's going on. I mean, it's so hard, Ben, for me to believe that all of this is real? I mean, it's hard deep down to think, can this actually happen?
Well, there might be something that they know that we don't know, and obviously they're probably looking at the positive side of it, and all we're being fed is the negative side of it.
What positive side do you see to us losing our democracy?
Well, I think the corporation will be richer, and then it will be trickled down to me.
It definitely is not going to trickle down to you.
But that's what I'm looking forward to.
But aren't you you're also concerned about what this is going to do?
It concerns me because it's an unknown and it had never been done before. But they are creating a blueprint that might be the one that will completely make the big companies even bigger and more monopolizing. Because if this thing should happen here right now, this time, we can very easily sue these companies in the antitrust. And that's why we broke up the AT&T a long time ago. We broke up a lot of insurance companies a long time ago. But now they're trying to put it back together, but with a different kind of formula. So much so that they will no longer be held responsible or accountable in this country. They want to get out of this country so that they will have all the influences and control, and that they basically will be the one to write their own rules. And that is what the scary part of this is.
Right.
Because if you really know what the company does, company really is not doing things for the goodness out of the goodness of their heart.
Well, didn't you just send me an article on Monsanto? Because they will fight tooth and nail to prove that, first of all, Roundup, the ingredient in Roundup is non-carcinogenic. That's not going to cause cancer, in spite of the fact that you had really independent scientists at the UN that investigated it. Monsanto, didn't they get their own scientists?
Well, this is something that I read last night, and I thought that it was probably a way of figuring out how a big company would fight a certain negative publicity. But as you probably know, a few months ago, the United Nations passed a resolution that states that this particular ingredient in Roundup, I think the weed killer, I think it's glyphosate, something like that, is carcinogen, and therefore it's labeled as potentially a cancer-producing ingredient. And so that's why in Europe they ban all these Monsanto products. And Monsanto, of course, want to refute that statement and refute that fact that no, we're not dealing with carcinogen in our products. So they outsource a company that supposedly have scientists that will work for them, and that they will come up with their conclusions independently. Well, unfortunately, this company that Monsanto hired as their outsourced independent investigator happens to also have scientists working
directly for Monsanto.
And as a matter of fact, there are two scientists in that group that's sitting that are now that are employed by Monsanto. So this company put together 10 scientists to look specifically on all the researches done on this particular ingredient of Roundup to find out indeed if it is really carcinogen. Well, like anything else in science, you can actually cut down the validity of a scientific paper, or even put a conclusion on the reverse of any scientific paper by cutting it down piece by piece. And this is actually what this group of scientists did. And the first is that they said, well, we have reviewed all the papers that were made and written about this particular study, and the methodology really does not conform to standard procedures. They're all varying right and left and so on, so you cannot really make a conclusion out of those different methodology. Number two, the statistics really stinks, and that this is not really how you make a statistics. Number three, the research really not that will, produce. And therefore, basically what this group of scientists are saying is that the conclusion that this particular ingredient in Roundup, I think it's glycophosphate, is therefore not valid. So basically, that's how they refute the conclusion.
But they're looking at the study in a way that anybody can say, well, no, I don't like that methodology. That methodology that's not what I would use. All the statistics was, those weren't, and then, so consequently, you're led to believe that their conclusion must also be faulty. When what this independent team did, they did nothing about studying the glycophosphate as far as doing any tests to see if it did in fact cause the cancer. They didn't do any of that, that research.
That is not what their goal is, Bonnie. What their goal is to put a questionable value on the previous research and previous conclusions. They put in an idea that this is not the correct conclusion.
Right.
So they put, like they said, beyond reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt.
So they basically put a reasonable doubt on this conclusion that Roundup has an ingredient that's a carcinogen. And I mean, the same thing as what the tobacco industry used years and years ago when they said that, well, this tobacco can cause cancer. And there were so many studies and studies and studies that proved that indeed it can cause cancer. But then what
the
did
tobacco scientists all said, no, your research is all wrong.
Right. So that basically put a doubt in the conclusion.
Right.
And when they have that, then this company Monsanto can go on selling their products worldwide.
Only because they're also using a lot of their profit to influence the representatives, the elected people who make these regulations, and say, well, I've got my study. You don't understand. Oh, by the way, did you get that $1 million into your
they have a
re-election?
They have a revolving door policy
and
also.
The revolving door.
Of course, our ex-congressman, Tabby Moffett, for instance, used to work for the legal department of Monsanto. And I'm sure that he must have drafted a lot of laws and bills to favor Monsanto. Of course, that's
and the CEO of Monsanto is now sitting as our food czar at the Food and Drug Administration.
Right.
So, you've got that kind of revolving door where the interest of the agency is specifically there to protect the corporations. It is not there to protect our food source.
Well, like I said, the FDA just a month ago passed this our GMO salmon.
The GMO salmon, right.
Which is really, we have to congratulate either the FDA or the makers of this GMO salmon, because this salmon can grow up to 3 times the size in just 6 months.
But it can't reproduce, Ben.
Well,
so it's okay if it gets loose and into the wild
that was the
stock.
question that was during the hearing about this GMO salmon, that they will all be in captivity. They cannot be let loose, and that is fine. Now somebody asked them, well, what happens if you cannot be certain that they cannot be let loose? Some of them will escape. And the answer was very quick in saying, well, we genetically made them as all of them are females, and they're all sterile.
Yes, all sterile female salmon.
I've heard that.
Where did we hear that? Let's see, wasn't there a movie about that?
Right.
Recently, that, these genetically reconstructed dinosaurs or something were okay, that they can't reproduce.
So I was laughing at that it was Jurassic Park all over. But these are now a done deal. This company is going to produce tons and tons of genetically modified salmon that will grow very fast with the least amount of food to feed them, and that they can be marketed within a year. And They, of course, are all sterile.
But, I mean, to say you don't know why they grow that fast, the fact that we give growth hormone to, what was it, the bovine for milk?
This is very different from that, Bunny. This is very different because the growth hormone that we're feeding to our livestock basically is a natural ingredient to make them grow.
Didn't it show that also was affecting our children, yes, which is why most of them...
Because the growth hormone gets absorbed in milks and gets absorbed in meat, so that when you eat the meat and when you drink the milk, you are consuming growth hormones. But in genetically modified salmon, they basically put an implant into the genes of the salmon so that they will grow basically directly according to how they were created.
Do we know what species was used?
Yeah, they show that, but of course that's, some of this information are proprietary, but yeah, they use 3 different species.
Of what?
I think there was one was another fish or something like that. I have to look into that.
Okay.
And so they come up with this just by splicing the gene and reinserting a certain gene from different species, you will have this salmon that will grow very fast. And therefore you can eat it and so on, but of course you don't know, and people will say, well, what's the long-term effect of that? Well, how do we know? Because it was just produced. I mean, you wait 50 years from now and I'll tell you what the long-term effect is.
Well, then we'll know. So we're kind of being used as the laboratory.
Right. So in any case, that, by the way, opens the door and the FDA for the simple reason that these companies, and now it is really an open season for big companies, because they are going to say, hey, listen, if you can do this to salmon, I'm going to do this to cows, I'm going to do this to other livestock, poultries.
Because then they don't have to eat as much.
Yeah.
We'll get them that much faster, we'll save grain, and we won't have to,
And they could probably genetically modify a chicken without
wings,
feet. No, you need the wings. I mean, you get to use that for when you watch football. You get to have the wings.
You have to have chicken wings to watch football. That's right.
So you could probably have a chicken that have 4 wings
or 6 wings.
Or 6 wings. So basically, that's what it is for. Now, so it opens up the door for all of these genetically modified organisms,
animals
that will be supposedly that we can use. And well, it basically had already been done, and that is the reason why we have these big turkeys that, in spite of the confinement and in spite of the lack of exercise, you get this turkey with huge breast and huge leg. Because if you compare that turkey that is basically
a natural turkey, a real turkey,
and compare it with a wild turkey, you'll notice a huge difference.
Right.
I mean, this turkey is huge and this turkey is skinny. And but that is through either one, natural selection. Well, it's not a natural selection, but that it's intentional selection. And 2 is the amount of feed that this turkey is getting. But the natural turkey, of course, is skinny and bony.
But it has a lot of breast meat on it. It actually has more breast meat, even though it looks skinnier, than one of those big, plump, pretty turkeys.
It's already being done, except that that kind of procedure is a lot of waste, a lot of expense, a lot of weight to make that into the market.
But
whereas
however,
all you need to do is splice a gene.
However, Ben, that may take a while to produce that, but all along it's the same turkey gene.
It is the same turkey gene.
I mean, we're not talking about using turkey genes in, or salmon genes in salmon, or turkey genes in turkey. We're talking about splicing it with another organism that is not necessarily the same species.
Well, that is why it's called recombinant DNA, and that is what we are doing now. We're basically doing it all the time. All the drug companies are now making that, and for that reason, drug manufacturers can charge $1,500, $2,000 per pill, because that is what they're saying, that they're, they're basically making this as a silver bullet to kill this particular, disease. And so that is basically where the major trend now is in pharmaceutical companies. Yet at the same time, you can see that they can charge whatever they want. And they can charge $1,000 a pill, they can charge $1,500 a pill, or they can bring that medication that used to be Daraprim, that used to treat this pneumocystis pneumonia for AIDS patients, from something like,
$3 or
$3 to $750 a pill.
Right.
Well, as it turned out, you can actually buy those pills outside of the United States for 16 cents a tablet.
Yeah.
But again, greed has no bounds. So basically, that's exactly what is being done in our pharmaceutical industries. And one time we're going to be talking just about pharmaceutical companies and what they're doing. And well, are there good guys? Are there bad guys in pharmaceutical companies? Well, I'm not sure, because I think you probably have to say, well, what they really are there for. They're there to make profit. And is it to cure people's disease? Well, that's secondary. But
I don't even know if they actually, I mean, Viagra or restless leg syndrome, or, half of the things that they have, that sell so well. I mean, sex always sells, so, I mean, that's, a lot of this are not diseases that
it sells money. There's a medication that people can take that makes their eyelashes thicker and longer, and a lot of people love that. I mean, women especially.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard about that.
Oh yeah, there's a medication that you can get rid of the wrinkles, and that is really good. Yeah.
I'll have to try some of those. You've never prescribed that for me, love.
And now they're coming out with medication that will make your hair grow. And actually, it's in the, So if you put all of these things together, you'll see, whoa.
It all makes money.
It all makes money.
Well, because this is a time of the year when you're encouraged to spend your money and go out and, show your loved ones how much you love them by spending your money. There are other ways, but this is our last show for 2015. We will be back in the middle of January with a whole new show. We do want to thank you for watching, but we especially want to thank the crew that has helped us through this whole year.
Yes.
Both Greg and Mike, both students at Norwich Regional Technical High School. They do seem like college kids to me. They're remarkable young men, so we want to thank both of them for being assisting us all year long as our technical crew. We'd also like to thank Ellen and Brian, but without Ellen here in the studio, it would be a dismal place. So Ellen and Brian, both of you, thank you very much. We wish all of you happy holidays and a happy new year, and I guess we'll see them all in 2016.
Yeah, it will be a totally different format, I guess.
We're hoping that it'll be a little different.
So we'll be talking more about Norwich if we want to.
Or
we'll keep track. So it will be totally surprised.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.